Morning Answer continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. This is one of the most important clips from Kamala's complete record over the last 8 years, I'd say. We've brought to you this before, but let's do it again. This is 2018, then Senator Kamala Harris, insinuating a comparison of ICE to the Ku Klux Klan. This was in a confirmation hearing for a nominee for Assistant Homeland Security Secretary for ICE named Ronald Vitiello. And this is how that went.
Klan was what we would call today a domestic terrorist group.
Why? Why would we call them domestic terrorist group?
Because they tried to use fear and force to change political environment.
And what was the motivation for the use of fear and force?
It was based on race and ethnicity.
Right. Are you aware of the perception of many about how the power and the discretion at ICE is being used to enforce the laws? And do you see any parallels?
I do not see any parallels between
I'm talking about perception.
officers and agents.
I'm talking about perception.
I do not see a parallel between what is constitutionally mandated as it relates to enforcing the law.
Are you aware that there's a perception?
I see no.
Are you aware that there's a
that
perception?
puts ICE in the same category as the KKK? Is that what you're asking me?
No, I'm very specific about what I'm asking you. Are you aware of a perception that the way that the discretion
I see no parallel.
I'm not finished.
I see none.
I'm not finished. I'm not finished. Are you aware that there's a perception that ICE is administering its power in a way that is causing fear and intimidation, particularly among immigrants and specifically among immigrants coming from Mexico and Central America? Are you aware of that perception?
I do not see a parallel between the power and the authority that ICE has to do its job and the agents and officers who do it professionally and excellently with lots of compassion.
Sir, how can you be the head of an agency and be unaware of how your agency is perceived by certain communities?
There is a lot of perceptions in the media and in the public that are incorrect about the agency.
But the perception exists, would you agree? Whether or not it's correct. And wouldn't you agree then that if that perception exists, there might need to be some work done to correct the perception?
I do want to advocate for the workforce, the vital public safety mission that they have to protect the homeland. And I think more people need to know how valuable they are to the society. So I agree with you on that.
She thinks she's being clever when it's just a grotesque and unfair insinuation. It's just an attempt to smear while saying, I just said there's a perception out there. I'm not comparing ICE to the KKK, but there's a perception out there that ICE is the KKK. Oh, really? Well, the perception is among people who are nitwits, you know, like members of Congress in your party that are calling for defunding ICE. Well, like you, who are also calling for defunding of ICE. That's a conversation we need to have. That's what Kamala Harris said when she was a senator. But you see the very cheap rhetorical artifice used by Kamala Harris. That's the kind of stuff that brought her approval rating down into the mid-20s. And that's where it will return to before too long if this campaign against her is prosecuted properly, in my view. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined again by Tom Homan, who's the former acting director of ICE. And Tom, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, I mean, I know you are very familiar with Kamala Harris and forays like what we just played. But, I mean, just your general reaction to her entrance into the race and the effort by the D.C. press corps to try to rehabilitate her image.
Well, look, if Kamala Harris was to become president, we were going to be worse off than ever because she's worse than Joe Biden. Because at one point, Joe Biden used to support law enforcement. He supported, when he was vice president, Barack Obama, ICE arrested and removed 409,000 people, which was a record at the time. So Kamala Harris, look, she's on record wanting to abolish ICE. She's on record supporting sanctuary cities. And look, she's on record of vilifying the men of the Horse Patrol, claiming they were racist and whipping black people when in fact that didn't happen. And look, Ron Patel is a friend of mine, but Ron Patel should have shot back to her and said, well, first of all, ICE is enforcing the laws written by Congress and signed by a president. They're not making this stuff up. And as far as what perception is because the media is shifting the narrative in a false way. Because if you look at what the Trump administration did when I was there, 91% of everybody ICE arrested was not just in the country illegally. They were a criminal. They were convicted of a crime or pending criminal charges. So prioritization, as always, was in the Trump administration. Matter of fact, the percentage of criminals arrested in the Trump administration is much higher than what the Biden administration has done. So bottom line is, you want to argue about this, what ICE really is, look at the data. The data is clear in it, but of course she's not going to look at the data because it doesn't support her hate of law enforcement.
I know you're still in contact with a lot of the guys on the front lines there. Do you have any sense, this is the question that everybody wants answered. We talked to Mark Morgan about this. Do you have any sense of what the interactions are between Department of Homeland Security personnel, perhaps other agencies' personnel, and people in this country illegally as it pertains to getting them in the pipeline to vote?
So look, we know that's happening, right? There's been several instances where they've been caught. Bottom line is, as I said I did a Fox show this morning, saying, look, what's happening to the southern border, when they unsecured the border, the first president in history of the nation, Biden, came in and unsecured the most secure border we ever had. Only president ever to do that. And people say, why? Why would they do it? Why would they do it? Well, it's obvious. It isn't mismanagement. It isn't incompetence. This is by design. They want to bring millions of people in this country for two reasons. Number one, Biden also overturned the Trump census rules, so these millions of illegal aliens being released into sanctuary cities will be counted in the next census. What does that mean? More seats in House of the Dems. Mm-hmm. And now they're talking about a mass amnesty, and Kamala Harris pushing a mass amnesty plan, which is going to make these people legally here and down the road citizens to vote. This is all about selling the security and the sovereignty of this nation out for future political power. There's no other reason to unsecure a border and create the biggest national security vulnerability I've seen in this nation. 148,000 dead Americans in fentanyl, 600% increase in sex trafficking, a record number of people on terrorist watch lists being across the border, over 2 million gotaways. No one does this without a purpose. And so people need to understand there's no, and I say this every time, every Democrat I meet on Hill, I'll tell me what's the downside on a secure border, sir. What is the downside on a secure border? What's the downside on less overdose deaths? What's the downside on less drugs? What's the downside on less illegal immigration? What's the downside on less trafficking in women and children? What's the downside on less terrorists? What's the downside on the criminal cartels making a hell of a lot less money? What's the downside? There is no downside. They did this for a future political purpose.
What do you know about this caravan that's coming up from southern Mexico? I hear it's anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 people. And that I know our aldermen here in Chicago are preparing for up to 5,000 people that would be coming in for the DNC.
You can be seeing more caravans because right now they are scared to death. The criminal cartels in Mexico are scared to death that President Trump's going to win the White House. And if he does, he's going to shut this down. And that's why the numbers have dropped under Biden recently. One reason is they're playing a shell game. They're pushing people to a CBP1 app and to the CHNV, saying they're legal pathways. So they're playing a game of the numbers and lying to American people. But second of all, Mexico's actually stepped up enforcement. Why is Mexico all of a sudden stepping up enforcement after 3.5 years? Because they don't want Trump to be president either, because that means the criminal cartels are out of business. That means much of the Mexican law enforcement and the Mexican government isn't getting their mordida. Their bribe money from the cartels. They don't want President Trump to secure the border either. Look, Mexico has no reason to secure the border. They got $61 billion, would it be $61 billion remittance payments last year from illegal aliens sending back to Mexico. This is all to prevent President Trump from becoming president. And their efforts are going to fail because President Trump will be our next president, and we will secure the border within 90 days.
Yeah, speak to that a bit in terms of securing the border in 90 days. What does that look like? A corollary to that is the deportation of people in this country illegally in some sort of prioritized way. You know, how quickly could that come together? How realistic is it to get to scale?
Well, securing the border is just a matter of dusting off the Trump policies that were the most effective. They're a game changer. Remain in Mexico, game changer. 30 safe country agreements, a game changer. End catch release. If people realize they're not going to be released after they cross the border, they're going to not come. And we put the Remain in Mexico program in place. After about 90 days, people stopped coming. When they realized they weren't being released in the United States to go off into the abyss, they stopped coming because they know, based on court data, 9 out of 10 people who claim asylum at the border will get an order removal because they simply don't qualify for asylum. They stopped coming, which a lot of lives were saved doing that. We'll continue building the wall. As far as deportation operations, the left wants you to think there's going to be neighborhood sweeps and Trump's going to build concentration camps. Nothing further from the truth. I mean, Trump, like I just explained, 9 out of 10 people ICE arrested under Trump were criminals. Criminals and national security threats always have to be first, and that's where it's going to be. And so we're going to be looking for those who find orders, those who had due process at great taxpayer expense, and were ordered removed. Now, you got to understand now that Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren talk about mass amnesty, if you award mass amnesty to the millions of people they release in the country that have been ordered removed, then we're never going to fix the border crisis because we're going to prove once again you can cross the border legally. You can even lose your case, get order removed by a federal judge. But you know what? If you go hide out long enough, we're going to give you something. We can't do this. We have to secure the border. There has to be consequences for crossing that border. And those who've been ordered removed after receiving due process at great taxpayer expense need to be removed. That's what the law requires, and that's what we need to do.
And a resource issue. You know, this is the crutch that the Dems have been using. Oh, we tried to provide more funding for border agents and more immigration judges and so forth, and the Republicans didn't act in a bipartisan way. You know the rap. But from the substantive point of view, address the resource issue. Do more funds need to be provided for more border agents, for more immigration judges to take the measures that you described in an effective fashion?
Well, look, first of all, this is what Biden did isn't a resource issue. It's a policy issue. If he would have kept the Remain in Mexico third safe country agreement and continue ending catch release, they wouldn't have the mess they had. So this is mainly a policy issue. Of course, law enforcement would always need more resources. But here's what the Dems are doing. They're pushing this false narrative that President Trump and Republicans blocked bipartisan legislation that could have fixed the border. That is a stone cold lie. Fact, first of all, the Dems blocked H.R. 2, which is the most significant border restriction ever in the history of this nation. And we know it would work. Why would H.R. 2 work? Because we proved it worked, because much of H.R. 2 is a Trump policies. Why would the Republicans negotiate against known success? H.R. 2 would work. But Schumer and the Senate, and Democrats in the Senate shut it down, wouldn't even discuss it. Then they put this bipartisan plan together with a couple of foolish Republicans signing on to it. They thought, well, getting a little bit is better than nothing. Wrong. That plan, if anybody actually read that bill, and they still agree with it, they're an idiot. Because if you read the bill, it does a couple things. Number one, it says end catch release. No, it doesn't. Go to page 114 and 116. If you claim asylum, you will be released. And what's everybody doing? Claim asylum. It did nothing about child trafficking. It did nothing about family groups. It said 5,000 illegal entries a day are okay. But once you go on beyond 5,000, we'll take steps to secure the border. That's not okay. 1.8 million illegal aliens a year is not okay. Why is that number 5,000? Why isn't it 1? True border security is 1. So we got to reverse that narrative that the Dems own right now. That we didn't shut down a bill that would fix the border. They shut down a bill that would fix the border. We nearly shut down a bill that wouldn't work and would just continue the massive illegal immigration that we're seeing today.
You've had interactions with Kamala Harris during your time in the federal government. She comes across to me as not just sort of, throwing in with the essentially the far left position on border security as well as policing, but she comes across to me as particularly antagonistic towards people like Border Patrol agents or police officers just generally. What's your impression?
You're exactly right. You just look at her history. I mean, she supported sanctuary policies when she was in San Francisco. She supported sanctuary policies as a senator. Remember during all the riots, I heard she set up a fund to help bail out people that not only attacked cops, actually killed a few. So all these riots, she was behind. Let's bail these people out. And so she doesn't support law enforcement. She wants to abolish ICE. And if you actually look what ICE does, ICE just doesn't enforce immigration law. They enforce drug trafficking, gun trafficking, and drug trafficking. They investigate human trafficking. They investigate technology being stolen and sold to our enemies across the world that can be used against our war fighters. ICE does a lot of national security. They work with the FBI and the Joint Terrorism Task Force, identifying terrorists in the country and trying to stop them from either entering or finding them in the country and moving them. They do a lot of national security work, but she doesn't even think about it. I don't think she even knows what they do. She just focuses on immigration. Let me tell you something. Illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. And as far as they're saying, well, illegal aliens commit less crimes than Americans, really? Because every illegal alien is a criminal. Because when you cross the border, it's a violation of the United States Code Title 8, 1325. It's a crime to enter the United States illegally. So every illegal alien in this country is a criminal because they enter the country in violation of federal law. So, and as far as the Cato Institute saying those who are illegally commit less crimes, there's more flaws in that study. They're combining illegal aliens with legal aliens. The illegal aliens, by far, are pretty law-abiding because they want to become U.S. citizens down the road. They just don't want to have a green card, so they're going to behave themselves. So, it's just not true. Kamala Harris, either she don't understand it or she's out really lying about it.
Tom Homan, former acting director of ICE. Tom, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook or read about it in the paper.